My name is Crosby Lyles, and this is News from the Can. In view of current events, I feel it's time to weigh in on a topic that I have avoided for quite some time. There are plenty of related issues that I have wanted to talk about before, but I didn't want to build my channel over my dead brother's grave. Not only that, but I was afraid that I might become mired in this one intractable subject to the neglect of others, like science and climate change. I ultimately decided that now that my channel has been established by discussing other things, if I can at all help because of my unique experience, then I should at least try, because the problem is costing the lives of too many of our best and brightest. You see, I know a little something about gun violence. In April of 2004, I was indicted for first-degree murder for shooting my brother the previous January. I sat in the max felony wing of the county jail for 15 months with no bond. An engineering student, a year away from graduating, I had no money to pay bail, even if I did get a bond. Lucky for me, I had the best public defender I could have hoped for. Unfortunately, I had a hanging judge, David Glant, who passed away in 2013, God rest his soul, and as yet no stand-your-ground laws on the books. Florida citizens had a duty to flee at that time, along with the difficult-to-navigate minimum mandatory sentencing law known as 10-20 life. This meant that if I went to trial and the jury came back with a lesser-included finding, the mandatory sentence would be life no matter what. I was overcome with grief, so I just surrendered to the process and waited for the truth to emerge. I have always had faith that the truth will set you free. My brother wasn't an ordinary gun enthusiast. A quick-draw artist with his 1911 Colt .45, my brother was deadly. He was also a binge drinker who believed he was reincarnated from Edgar Cayce, who was reincarnated from Jesus Christ. He had a special relationship with seven spirits who controlled the world and an obsession with numerology as well as crop circles and the UFO phenomenon. The seven spirits followed him home from an unsuccessful attempt to bring our father back from the Philippines in the mid-1990s. Not to be confused with the seven spirits of God mentioned in the book of Revelations. These had names like Nikto, Clicto, and Salvador. To him, they were all powerful, and he had a deep-seated need for the rest of the family to believe that he was their chosen apostle. He had chosen Gainesville to be the staging area for some sort of David Koresh-style commune where he would father a horde of mixed-race children for a convoluted scheme towards long-term world peace. Over the years of exasperated arguments with everyone who would listen to him, he eventually settled down to the point that we only ever heard from the spirits when he was drunk. On January 26, 2004, he had become particularly inebriated and unruly. I had seen his .45 sitting on a small bookshelf that stood by his seat at the dinner table the day before, and now he was gesticulating at me with a steak knife as he complained that I had more time for my 12-step recovery friends than I did for him. Then with tears in his eyes, he asked, quote, "Don't you ever think about sucking on a pipe?" End quote. He was talking about the barrel of a gun and suicide. "No," I said. "Hold that thought. I'll be right back." The suicide reference meant that we had reached a critical phase in our long-running saga, and it was time to get him evaluated through the Baker Act. I needed to be discreet, however, about getting to a phone to call the police because I didn't know how police involvement might affect him. I went back to my room but had forgotten that the landline was stretched into another room and my cell phone was stone dead on the charger. My mother was washing dishes in the kitchen adjacent to the dining area, so I had to go back out past the table and confer with her. I said a prayer and debated about whether I should be armed or not. By the way, the answer to that question is, if you think you need to be armed, just leave and call the police. I really agonized over how to proceed as I was overwhelmed from school and foggy from a severe respiratory infection. I took the gun but didn't have a well-defined plan, which was bad, because he saw the gun as I walked back out. Now I was stuck. With the genie out of the bottle, there was no graceful way it was going back in. Gun in hand, I was a sitting duck in view of his advanced proficiency. If he managed to get his hand on a gun, I was dead, and who knows what would follow. His shoulder dipped like he was going to push the table away, and I fired. This is hard to write, as this was the saddest day of my life. In many ways, grief has permanently wiped me out. Besides the personal loss of someone I loved, killing someone who needs help is the ultimate personal failure for someone involved in 12-step recovery. He went down face first on the floor. I had my mother call 911, and then came the hard part. I had to pull my brother's body out onto the floor and begin CPR. I had a feeling he was dead, but I held out hope until hours later when the cops confirmed my worst fear. I told 9/11 over the phone that I had shot him in self-defense. But when the cops got there, all I could do was show them the breached revolver on the counter and tell them that I was the shooter. Poor choice of words. They took me out the back door, put me in handcuffs, read me my rights, and I didn't see the inside of this house again for over 7 years. I sat in 2 different interrogation rooms at the police station with blood on my pants and an enormous gobstring of snot oozing from my nose to my knees. They never told me what I was charged with. They interviewed me and my mother separately, and because we are from Mayberry and not the real world, we told them the truth as we knew it. I gave them as many details as possible, believing that the truth would indeed set me free. Later, in consultation with my attorney, he said that usually they try to suppress a videotaped interview, but in this case, he said, we need that tape. Still later, he referred to my brother as a psychopath. I always thought of my brother as more of a garden variety, well-armed Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde type from alcohol. So the term psychopath seemed extreme, but it made me wonder what the hell else had surfaced. I never really got all the details, and it's not important. He was sick and suffering and needed help. If I had left that goddamn gun in its pouch, he might have gotten the help that he deserved. Or not. We will never know. Our family has had many discussions about what if he hadn't been killed. Would he have killed himself or someone else? I have been told by various family members that they thought the fateful call would have come after my demise at his hands. Who knows? On the ride from the police station to the county jail, I felt cocooned by grace, and a gentle voice from within told me not to worry. It was over now. Indeed, I would shortly be unshackled from modern convenience and the isolating pursuit of status as I was thrust into a ministry of patience, tolerance, and love in a world populated almost exclusively by abandoned adult children like my brother. Close interaction with felonious characters of every description gave me some insight into what I believe are the root causes of homicide. A gun is a symbol of personal power. Like any other animal, people lash out when they feel they are trapped, but particularly in the case of having no way to achieve basic self-esteem. Most mass murderers are men. So what kind of collision are we having with male self-esteem to cause so many of them to become rampage killers? Solve this basic problem, and we probably won't need any new gun legislation. Having said that, in doing some basic research, I found that rampage killing is nothing new. But before we see the 3 deadliest rampage killings of all time, a quick word about the obvious. Statistical mechanics rule the universe. I don't need to understand the physics that produce a response to predict what will happen under certain circumstances. All I need to do is observe what happens under as many conditions as I can and then categorize the responses. This is why enormous reams of data are collected and organized from every source possible every second of the day all over the world, because observing what has happened gives us a good idea of what may happen in the future. Statistical mechanics comes down to the number of actors and their proximity. 100 sheep and no wolf mean that life is good for sheep. 100 sheep and 1 wolf per 10 square miles, and life is mostly good for sheep and wolves. But if we have 100 sheep and 100 wolves in that same space, life will most likely end up sucking for both populations. Now let's consider that according to Justin Peters on Slate.com, there are as many as 3.75 million AR-15 style weapons in the United States as of 2012. Then, from the National Alliance on Mental Illness at NAMI.org on their homepage, quote, psychosis is a symptom, not an illness, and it is more common than you may think. In the U.S., approximately 100,000 people experience psychosis each year. As many as 3 in 100 people will have an episode at some point in their lives. Now, for some super crude statistics. There are over 300 million guns in the United States. That's about a gun for every man, woman, and child in this country. So chances are that many of the 100,000 people a year suffering from a psychotic episode will be in close enough proximity to a gun in one form or another that they could put their hands on one if they wanted to. No doubt, blood is going to continue to spill, with or without legislation, and with or without guns. But here's the thing. 2 of the deadliest mass rampage killings in history before Las Vegas were done by killing the pilot and co-pilot of airliners with handguns. The subsequent plane crashes killed 43 people in 1964 and 42 people in 1987. So there is something to be said about regulating the proximity of ease and capacity, which is the main issue with assault rifles. By their nature, assault rifles make it easier to kill masses of people. To his credit, President Trump did just issue a directive to the Justice Department to regulate bump stocks. Better late than never. Unfortunately, the twisted mind of a person who may only be temporarily psychotic for a myriad of reasons can manufacture the ways and means from an infinite number of resources to kill masses of people at any time. Though getting rid of the ways and means is impossible, making the deed more difficult to pull off gives the malefactor more time to change his or her mind. Personal engagement is often helpful in averting these tragedies, but it's not for everyone. I spent several years locked up with murderers of every description, and they all had one thing in common. They were all human beings who usually responded well to a little respect and basic human dignity. If we reach out to those close to us who seem lost, we may be as much a friend as a lifesaver to more people than we may realize. However, erratic people can be dangerous. We can become entangled with unpredictable circumstances that are difficult to extricate ourselves from. We could be robbed, raped, verbally attacked, repeatedly pestered for handouts, or otherwise inconvenienced beyond the limits of our busy lives. Each of us has an internal barometer that tells us when someone is more trouble than we can personally handle. A lot of times it's obvious, especially when we talk to them. Swaggering, posturing, threatening, or other disorderly behavior with guns or with other weapons should be immediately reported to the police. If you are not sure that it's an emergency, just tell the police you are not sure when you call. If someone is flipping out, you may want to tell the police there is a psychiatric emergency and someone needs crisis intervention. If it's a family member and you are not sure how much danger you or someone else are in, just discreetly call the police and tell them what's going on and that you don't know what to do. They may have information or resources available to help. Your police department also probably has a website or even a Facebook page that may list those resources. If you want more information on dealing with mental illness, visit NAMI.org. NAMI.org. If someone you know has a problem with alcohol, you might try Al-Anon.org. See the link in the description. From the NAMI.org homepage, early warning signs of psychosis include the following: a worrisome drop in grades or job performance, trouble thinking clearly or concentrating, suspiciousness or uneasiness with others, a decline in self-care or personal hygiene, spending a lot more time alone than usual, strong, inappropriate emotions or having no feelings at all. Signs of early or first episode psychosis. Determining exactly when the first episode of psychosis begins can be hard, but these signs and symptoms strongly indicate an episode of psychosis. Hearing, seeing, tasting, or believing things that others don't. Persistent, unusual thoughts or beliefs that can't be set aside regardless of what others believe. Strong and inappropriate emotions or no emotions at all. Withdrawing from family or friends. A sudden decline in self-care, and trouble thinking clearly or concentrating. Before we close, a quick word about home defense. The best gun for home defense is a short-barreled pump shotgun loaded with light field load ammunition. Lower velocity, non-magnum, non-armor-piercing ammo is best to prevent innocent housemates and neighbors from being inadvertently hit during a firefight, as high-velocity rounds penetrate walls, drywall. Bullets just go right through drywall. Forget about it. Train with your weapons, teach your children about them, and keep them secure at all times. Handle your gun as though it is loaded at all times. People get accidentally shot with supposedly empty guns all the time. Drunkenness, stupidity, and guns don't mix. Never play with or point a gun at anyone ever unless you fully intend to shoot them. Know that if you do shoot someone, you need to have the law on your side and a really good lawyer. Finally, if you feel like putting a gun to your own head, remember that it's always darkest before the dawn. Don't leave before your miracle happens, because it's coming. And that's about it for now. I hope you got something out of that. My name is Crosby Lyles, and this has been News from the Can. Thanks for watching. See ya.